Okay, I'm finally getting around to uh, demonstrating or redoing the demonstration of my EFI controller. Um, Hopefully this will be much more to the point and a lot quicker to run through. So this is the controller. It only has 3 nodes. That's it. Um, you only need the composite signal of the airflow from the cylinder, the engine RPS from the crankshaft, and the output based off those 2 settings going over to the fuel throttle position. That's it. Doesn't need anything else in terms of variables that come in and out of this thing. What it does internally, in my opinion, is also pretty simple. You're taking your airflow from the first channel of your composite, multiplying it by 10,000 to get it to a number you can actually read. Um, you're then brings it up. You're then dividing it by the engine RPS, which brings it down to what it would be at if it was spinning at 1 RPS. And you're taking that and dividing it by whatever engine size you're working with, whether it's a 1.1, 3.3, or a 5x5. I got these values for each engine size by taking a single cylinder engine with a single crankshaft, attaching an electric motor to the back of it, and spinning the engine, forcing the engine to spin at exactly 1 RPS. And that's through a PID I stuck on the end of there and ran it at that given amount. And then took a measurement of the airflow at 1 RPS. And I did that with no fuel. You don't want the engine running. You want it to be literally 100% being pulled from the motor. And that's what it flows at as a 1x1. That's how it flows at a 3x3, and that's how it flows at a 5x5. That's what you need there. Excuse me. Need to drink something. So that's it. And that's really all you need to read off of that. So after you divide those two, you're then going to multiply what you get by the fuel ratio you're going to run with. I've found that 0.52 is the peak efficiency in power for a given amount of air going through the engine. If you have a fixed load and your throttle is wide open and you're not bouncing off the rev limiter, like you're not bouncing off of 60 RPS, like you're sitting somewhere like 25, 5, 10, just somewhere not dead and not limited by the RPS. At a constant load with the throttle wide open, the RPS you get with a fuel ratio of 0.52 is going to be lower if it's 0.51 or 0.53. 0.52 is the highest RPS with a constant load at a constant throttle. So, in my opinion, that is peak efficiency of these engines. So once you get that out there, you have your fuel, and then that sends through where your position for the fuel throttle is going to be at. So really, once you have these values, including your, multiplying it up, once you have these 2 values, whatever you figure those things out, you only need the air fuel flow, not the amount the throttle is at, but the flow going through the engine and the engine RPS that it's at currently. That's it to get your fuel throttle. So what I've got here is a simple inline 4-cylinder engine that I threw together real quick. And it really is just the alternator, starter on top, regular belt on the front center here, with an air pump. And I run this one because you can change it to being off to 1, being the highest. And unlike the electric pumps, it will still allow fluid to flow through it, but it will not be multiplied by whatever you have on here. It'll act like it's naturally aspirated if this value has a 0 on there. So depending on how much load you really have on the engine, like you can decrease that, it'll be more efficient. Yeah, that'll work. Like if you're idling somewhere, I wouldn't bother giving it forced air into the engine. I would just have this shut off and let it run right through. But it also demonstrates that you can change that value all over the place, and my system will not care whether it's forced induction or not. Yeah, running off of there, that just goes right into the intake. There's nothing else screwing with that. As for the fuel, it's just the fuel manifold going right off a small tank, running off diesel, and that's literally all that is. I'm not forcing fuel into my engine. I don't believe you have to do that. I haven't tried it, but I'm pretty sure you don't really benefit from that at all. Pretty sure you don't. Yeah, that should be pretty much the only real special thing about that. I mean, I got the battery stuck on the bottom here, and I got a constant on for the alternator. And I'll go look here real quick. That goes right to the alternator. That's all that does. It just, allows it to recharge the small battery. I've got pumps for each radiator, and they just loop up. You just, pull out the bottom of the radiator, come out, loop up top here, run through a coolant manifold, and goes right over the top and right back in the radiator again. It's a little small closed loop system. Running a simple single exhaust out the back, and on the back here I have the clutch running off of a throttle on the end, so I can have it, off when I'm just starting the engine up. The gearbox that goes from 1:1 to a 3:1 for the max ratio, and over to a generator, which, because I have the alternator here running that battery, I have this running over to the medium-sized battery off the end there, and this is at a 0 charge. I'd use it for testing outputs, make sure, testing those things, make sure it's working the way it's supposed to. As for my throttles, I've got my air throttle here, my, calling a supercharger is essentially what it is, but my fluid pump that feeds the air into it off of here, and lastly one for the clutch. I have the only thing running off of the fuel manifold is what's coming off of the EFI controller off the fuel throttle position. And that's it. Let's see. I have this running out the gearbox, change between the ratios, and backlights off the ignition, and reading the battery and reading the generator. And that's it. Yeah, the ignition just turns on all electronics. I gotta push for the starter. And the instrument panel, I'm also reading a composite. Same signal I'm getting off. I am not getting a signal off of that. Yes, I am. All this is so, and I use this for troubleshooting, is you're taking the exact same thing for air, fuel, and temperature. These modular engine cylinders do not send out any other signal besides the first three. And I'm multiplying the air and the fuel, and temperature doesn't need to be multiplied. It can go right across, and that's all it's doing. And that gives me a reading to get off of here, so I can troubleshoot whatever's going on. These do blow up when you get a bit more BO, much more beyond 100 degrees Celsius, so I usually don't bother between outside of that, but yeah, it's all this really is. And to demonstrate it working, turn on the ignition, give it, it's a little high, right there ought to be okay. Get it started. That 13.2 AFR is the air to ratio. That's how much air you're getting per part of fuel, just like I mentioned. That happens to be where you end up with when you do a 0.52 ratio on the engine. much air. Let's say you take a hose and you hook it up to a tank of water. And better yet, take a hose with nothing in the end of it, just an open water hose. Hook it up to a faucet. Turn the faucet on. Watch it. You'll get partial. You'll get whatever amount of water flowing out of there. And it's nice and lazy. Put your thumb over it. And the water's got to still come out. So you're getting the same amount of water out of the hose because it's on opening, you're increasing the pressure behind it. So picture your thumb and the hose being where the air bottle is. It's kind of an explanation of what it is. And this being how much, and that being how much pressure is behind it. That's pretty much how it's shutting the air. Should do that. That's decreasing the load. Air coverage and all that. And you're actually protecting that. You guys can't hear me. So this is, so what I'm doing here is I maxed the load, changed the gearbox to 3 to 1, or a 1 to 3, and, oh, I should have realized that it sounded way too loud earlier. I'm sorry. So yeah, you can change that wherever it needs to go, and it'll still stick at a 13.2. Including if you turn the supercharger. Does not care. The other time that they'll get really off the wall is if you bounce off the limiter. In which case it'll just, go all over the place. You can easily just, turn that down. Does not care. So, yeah, figured it'd be a good demonstration. But as simple as I can get it. It doesn't be too long.